All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Yeah, my name is Eli. I'm the pastor here at Nicholas City Church. I'm so glad that you guys are here with us today. Today, we're starting off a brand new series called With a Little Help from My Friends. And in this series, we are talking about what it looks like to really be a friend to those around you, as well as what it looks like to live in community. So I'm really excited to be starting this off today. I'm glad you're here. Now, in my life, I have a friend named Aaron. And Aaron and I, we've been friends since preschool. And we actually have a picture of Aaron here. Aaron and his wife, Mary, and they just recently had a new baby girl. Her name is Primrose. And Aaron and I, we've been friends since preschool. Some of you might know Aaron and Mary. They've been up here at the church a few times visiting. They've been to Buffalo a few other times as well. And so I just love them. They're a great family. They're actually going to be with us next week, so I'm very excited. He's going to be up here as part of the church again next week. But Aaron and I, we've been best friends since preschool. And Aaron has always been the cool kid. Like, not just one of the cool kids. Aaron was always the cool kid. Didn't matter if we were in preschool or middle school or high school. Aaron was just the cool kid every stage of life. And it didn't even matter where we went, in school or at church, even at random events or concerts or wherever where we would go. Aaron was always the cool kid. People wanted to be Aaron's friend. People wanted to be like Aaron and would copy the different styles or things that he did. I mean, just look at him. Look at the mustache. You can see that he's definitely one of the cool kids. But him and I, we've been friends for a long time. And so we look back at our lives and we kind of laugh about the fact that we don't know how he was the cool kid. Because I have an old picture of him here. And if you look at this picture, underneath you don't see his braces and the other things. But you look at him and you think he would be more cast as like the geek in a movie rather than the super popular cool kid. But you're just going to have to take my word for it. Aaron was the coolest. Everyone liked Aaron and everyone wanted to be Aaron's friend. Now, me, on the other hand, I was not quite in that cool kid category. See, I was kind of just on the outskirts of being a cool kid. I never quite fit in or quite fell into that specific category. And so because of that, there would be some weeks that I'd be invited to people's houses to go swimming or to the movies, and I'd be hanging out with the cool kids. But then the next week, they would not want to talk to me or not want to have anything to do with me after that. And so I kind of grew up not having a lot of really close friends in my life because I never really fit into a particular circle. But Aaron was different. See, where the other kids might not talk to me for a week or would wait until I got cool again, Aaron was my friend all the way from preschool to this point in our lives. And it didn't matter to him if I was cool that day or if I was not cool. It didn't matter what anyone else thought. I always knew that Aaron had my back. So when people would talk about me behind my back or when people would make fun of me, I knew that Aaron would always stick up for me, that he'd always be a person who would have my back and would come to my defense. And I really appreciated that, not just because he was the coolest kid around, right, and he's talking good about me and he's my friend, but because I had a friend who was loyal and committed regardless of what anyone else thought. Now, maybe you have a friend like that in your life. Maybe there's someone that comes to mind. Maybe you have your Aaron in your life who has been your friend for a long time, and you just know that they have your back. Maybe it's a friend that you know that you can depend on or know that you can trust or know that is always going to stand up for you. And friends like that are great. And in fact, as we talk about friendship, and as we start off this series and we talk about this idea of loyal friendship, it reminds me of a story in the Bible of two guys, and their name were Jonathan and David. And I want to jump in and read their story, but before we jump into this story, I want to give you a little bit of context and kind of maybe explain, I guess, the characters, if you will. And so the first one that I want us to know about is King Saul. Saul was the king of the Israelite people. And in fact, he was a well-respected king. Everyone loved King Saul. He was actually their very first king that Israel ever had. And so people loved and respected King Saul. And everywhere he went, he was exalted and praised. And everyone liked him. Well, King Saul had a son, and his son's name was Jonathan. And by all accounts, Jonathan was set up in line to be the heir, the succession to the kingdom, to the throne. Well, here's where David comes in. So David, you might know David. David is from the story of David and Goliath, right? The story of a young boy who defeats a warrior giant with just a slingshot and a stone, and he takes him down. Well, this is the story that we're going to read is one chapter later. So it's the next thing that happens in that story of David and Goliath. So let's go ahead and take a look in 1 Samuel chapter 18. It says this. By the time David had finished reporting to Saul, Jonathan was deeply impressed with David. An immediate bond was forged between them. He became totally committed to David. From that point on, he would be David's number one advocate and friend. Jonathan, out of his deep love for David, made a covenant with him. He formalized it with solemn gifts, his own royal robe and weapons, armor, sword, bow, and belt. So here we see that they meet, and immediately there's this bond. They just connect. They're just going to be BFFs forever, BFFs for life, right? And so Jonathan shows David this by giving him some pretty significant gifts. The first thing that we see that he gives is his royal robe, and this was a really big deal. This was a sign of who you are. This was an intimate gift that said, this is what represents me as a person. And he gave him his royal garment saying, what I have, you have. And then he went on and he gave him other gifts, his weapons, armor and sword and bow. Those were things that you carried around with you everywhere that you went. They were personal items. And so Jonathan gives these gifts to David saying, hey, I'm committed to you. We're going to be friends. I'm going to make a covenant and we're going to be friends for life. Well, the story continues on. It says, whatever Saul gave David to do, he did it. And he did it well. So well that Saul put him in charge of his military operations. Everybody, both the people in general and Saul's servants, approved and admired David's leadership. As they returned home after David had killed the Philistine, Goliath, the women poured out of all the villages of Israel, singing and dancing, welcoming King Saul with tambourines, festive songs, and lutes. In playful frolic, the women sang, Saul kills by the 1,000, and David kills by the 10,000. Well, this made Saul angry, very angry. He took it as a personal insult. He said, they credit David with 10,000s and me only with thousands. Before you know it, they'll be giving him the kingdom. From that moment on, Saul kept his eye on David. So we see Saul starting to get a little bit jealous, maybe a little bit protective of his position. He starts to feel intimidated that the people love David. And he said, man, I'm going to lose my kingdom because David is the cool kid now. David's the popular one. And so he's starting to get jealous. And as we see kind of throughout the story, leads us to this next point in chapter 19. It says that Saul called his son Jonathan together with his servants and ordered them to kill David. But because Jonathan treasured David, he went and warned him, my father is looking for a way to kill you. Here's what you are to do. Tomorrow morning, hide and stay hidden. I'll go out with my father into the field where you're hiding, and I'll talk about you with my father, and we'll see what he says. And then I'll report back to you. So Jonathan brought up David with his father, speaking well of him. Please, he said to his father, don't attack David. He hasn't wronged you, has he? And just look at all the good he has done. He put his life on the line when he killed the Philistine. What a great victory God gave Israel that day. You were there, you saw it, and you were on your feet applauding with everyone else. So why would you even think of sinning against an innocent person, killing David for no reason whatsoever? And so Jonathan kind of goes to bat, if you will, for David. He's saying, listen, he's not done anything wrong. He's not trying to be a threat to you. He's not trying to overtake the kingdom. He's not done anything wrong other than help you. So why do you want to kill him? And so he convinces his dad, he convinces King Saul to not kill David, at least for a little bit. You see, Saul continues and he makes this agreement that he's not going to try to kill David, but we see just a few verses later that although he doesn't kill David personally, he tries to send him out to battle alone. And he tries to send him out to be ambushed. And he tries to kind of create this space where David would die, just not by his hand. Well, as we keep reading, we see that David gets wind of this, and he's like, man, Jonathan, I don't know. You're telling me that your dad doesn't want to kill me. You're saying, hey, my dad says he doesn't want to kill you, but it really sure seems like your dad wants to kill me. It seems like he's doing everything he can to kill me. And so David's kind of stuck in between, and he's in this spot of confusion. And so Jonathan and David set out to get to the bottom of this. They set out to find the truth. In chapter 20, Jonathan says this. He says, come outside. Let's go to the field. When the two of them were in the field, Jonathan said, as God is my witness, by this time tomorrow, I'll get it out of my father to see how he feels about you. And then I'll let you know what I learn. May God do his worst to me if I let you down. If my father still intends to kill you, I'll tell you and get you out of here in one piece. If I make it through this alive, continue to be my covenant friend. And if I die, keep the covenant friendship with my family forever. So Jonathan is saying, listen, we're going to get to the bottom of this, and I'm going to find out what my dad is planning. I'm going to find out what my dad is thinking. And you know what? It might be dangerous. I might die, but it's worth the risk. I'm going to get to the bottom of this one way or the other. And so he sets out on a mission to find out what his dad really thinks. And so him and David kind of devise a plan. And as they're trying to find out the truth, King Saul gets wind of it. He knows what's going on, and he's furious. He ends up responding this way. It says, Saul exploded in anger at Jonathan. You son of a slut! Don't you think that I know that you're in cahoots with David? Disgracing both you and your mother? For as long as David is walking around free on this earth, your future in this kingdom is at risk. Now go, get him, bring him here. From this moment, he's as good as dead. So Jonathan finds out the truth. That's a pretty strong indicator, right, of what King Saul wants. He says, I now know what my dad is going to do. He's trying to kill David because he's afraid that he's going to lose the kingdom, and he wants to set me up for success. And so Jonathan is faced with a choice here. He's faced with a choice. He knows that David is popular and a threat to him ever becoming the king. So he has a choice to make. Do I let my father know where David is? Or do I go and warn David? And so we know that Jonathan's a loyal friend, so he goes and he tells David to run for his life. And he leaves him with these words. He says, go in peace. The two of us have vowed friendship in God's name, saying God will be the bond between me and you, and between my children and your children forever. So Jonathan stays loyal to David. When I look at this story, when I look at this relationship, I see loyalty all throughout it. See, even though Jonathan was at risk to lose everything, even though he was in danger himself, he didn't know how his dad was going to react. He didn't know what was going to happen. He said, even if I die, I'm still going to be loyal to my friend. And he goes and he warns David, and David ends up on the run, a fugitive from the king. And during this, we see that throughout the story of David fleeing and being a fugitive, that Jonathan helps him along the way a few other times, warning him and trying to get word to him to protect him from Saul trying to kill him. So Jonathan stays loyal to the promises that him and David made to each other. Well, later in the story, we see that King Saul and Jonathan end up dying in battle. And as they die in battle, we see David sing a sad song. He cries out and sings a sad song for the life of his friend. And later in the story, we see that David does become the next king of Israel. And as he does, it's an interesting thing, because it's not just Jonathan who stays loyal. We see David stay loyal to his friend Jonathan, even though he had just died in battle. The next thing we see David do after he's king is he calls for the son of Jonathan. And Jonathan's son's name is Mephibosheth. Try saying that 10 times fast, right? Mephibosheth. So he calls for Mephibosheth and he says, bring him to me. Now, I can imagine if I'm Mephibosheth and I'm thinking, man, there was this conflict between Saul and David and there was this kind of struggle for the throne and my dad was trying to kill David. My granddad's trying to kill David, all these things. I can imagine Mephibosheth feeling kind of worried. Like, I'm the bloodline to the last king. I'm the last bloodline left of King Saul. Maybe David's going to kill me. I can imagine maybe thinking about, man, should I go? Should I run? But here's the problem. The Bible tells us that Mephibosheth is paralyzed. He doesn't have use of either of his legs, and so he's kind of in a position where he's stuck. I can imagine him saying, well, I can't really run. I can't make it on the hills. I can't make it alive. And so he gets taken to King David. And I can imagine him in fear and in worry, wondering what's going to happen. But as soon as he gets there, David embraces him, and he tells him, you have a spot at my table. And to have a spot at the king's table was an incredibly big deal. He said, listen, whenever I eat, you are welcome. You have a permanent spot, that anytime that I have a meal, you are welcome to be here. You are welcome in the kingdom. And David doesn't just stop there. He actually gives Mephibosheth all of Saul's land. Every piece of land that Saul owned, he passes it on to Jonathan's son, Mephibosheth. He says, listen, even though your dad's not here, even though your dad has died, I'm going to stay loyal to the promise that I made him. And for his sake, I'm going to give you everything that was King Saul's. David stayed loyal right back to Jonathan. Jonathan was loyal to David, and David was loyal to Jonathan. Man, what a friendship, right? As we talk about what friendship is, this is a prime example of staying loyal, staying committed to a friendship all the way till the end. And maybe we kind of look at this friendship and we go, man, that's really nice. And maybe in your mind, you think about a friend in your mind. Kind of like I have Aaron. Maybe you think of someone in your mind who you're like, man, we're going to be friends forever. And there's that person, that one close person that I'm always going to be friends with, that I'm going to be loyal to. But here's the interesting thing. As we're talking about this idea about community, this type of loyalty, this type of friendship isn't actually just reserved for the people that you're close to. This type of loyalty and commitment isn't actually just for the people that you grew up with since preschool or just for the people that you get along with really well. In fact, the Bible goes on and it tells us that this is the friendship that we should have with one another. This is the friendship that should be developed within a church. This is the friendship that should be prevalent in our lives with the people sitting next to us. You know, there's a verse in the Bible, and Paul writes this. He says, be devoted to one another in love. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. I love this word, devoted. This word devoted, it literally means in the Greek, it means to love like family. To love and to treat someone like family. It literally says that it's like treating someone like a son or a daughter or like a father or a mother. This word devoted is not just hey, let's be committed to one another when it's convenient or when it's easy. It says be devoted like family would be devoted to one another. Be devoted. I love this because that's how God designed the church to function. This is Paul's writing to the church. He says, be devoted, be a family to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Now, I love this because That's how God designed the church to function. He says to be loving and be committed in love. You know, Jesus actually talks about this as well in the book of John. He says this, he says we should love one another. He leaves his disciples with a commandment. He says, I'm leaving you a new commandment. Love each other. Just as I have loved you, you should love each other. Your love for one another will prove to the world that you're my disciples. Now, listen, I've heard this verse a lot, and oftentimes that I hear it, it's associated with going and drilling wells in Africa and bringing fresh water to Africa, or going out and feeding the homeless. And you know what? Those things are great. Those things are needed, and Jesus talked about doing those things often. He talked about doing things for the least of these and caring for the orphans and the widows. He talks about those things very often, but this verse is not about that. If you look at the context of this verse, Jesus is talking to a small group of his disciples. A small group, and he says, listen, this is the commandment I'm going to leave you. This is the last thing I'm going to leave you with. Love each other. For your love for one another will show others that you're my disciples. He doesn't say, hey, your love for others or your love for those around you. He says, your love for one another, the person next to you, that is how people will know that you're my disciple, by the way that you love the person standing next to you today. He's talking to his disciples. See, oftentimes we miss this. We know the fact that God's love is for everyone and that we should go out and love people outside of the walls of the church, but oftentimes we forget that God calls us to be a family, to love one another, to be committed to one another, to be loyal to one another like a family would be. Jesus says, this is how people will know that you're my disciples. Listen, you might have disagreements with the people next to you. You might have different political views or different beliefs or different preferences, but it's what we do with those things that really sets us apart. It's what we do with those disagreements. It's what we do with our loving of each other in this room and the people who walk through those doors that really sets us apart. That when people look at the church, they should say, man, the way that they love one another, the way that they care for one another, the way they lift each other up. Jesus' definition of love is being patient and kind and not being self-centered. The way that those people do that with each other, man, I know they love Jesus. See, God's design is for us to be a friend, not just to the people that you like, but to the people who are sitting next to you today. In fact, if we go back to the writing of Paul, he continues, he says, be devoted, be committed, be loyal to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Then he goes on, he says, never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. I love this because he goes on, right? He says, be devoted, be committed, but then he's going to give us a list of how to actually do that, how to practically love one another, how to be loyal to one another within the church. And he says, be devoted, and it starts with your own spiritual life. Don't be lacking in your passion for God. Don't be lacking in your spiritual existence, but stay hungry for who God is. Be passionate about serving God and about loving God. He says, if you want to be a friend, if you want to be the type of friend that is committed and loyal that God has designed you to be, it starts with your spiritual life. He goes on, and he says in the next verse, be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. So he says, listen, the first step to being committed, to being devoted, is your spiritual life, to be passionate about who God is. But the next step is your own attitude. He says, listen, be joyful in hope. You should have joy in your life and hope and peace in your life. It says, when hardships come, be patient in them. Listen, Some of you don't have solid friendships in your life. Some of us don't have strong relationships in our lives because we don't do these things. We aren't joyful. And so Paul tells us, be devoted, be committed, but it starts with your relationship with God. Next, it starts with your attitude. To find joy and to find peace so that you can have something to give. The next thing Paul writes, he says, share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. And so now he's getting to the application. He says it starts with your spiritual life, and then it goes to your attitude, and now we start doing. If you want to have friendships and relationships the way that God designed you to have, the way the Bible designed you to have, this is what we got to do to share with the Lord's people, to be hospitable, to be kind and generous in our lives. But I love this word hospitality, because this word hospitality doesn't just mean inviting someone over for dinner. It doesn't mean just opening up your table. It literally means to open yourself up. It means to open up your life to someone. So rather than just saying, oh, well, I come into church and I hear a message and I drink my coffee and I walk out. Paul's saying, listen, be generous, but then open up your lives. Open up your anxieties and your fears. Talk about it. Let people into your thoughts. Let people into your hardships. Let people into your joy. Make yourself available and open. If you want to be the type of friend God designed you to be, don't just come into church and get something and leave. Open yourselves up for relationships. Come to a connect group. Get involved. Go meet someone outside of the church for lunch. Practice hospitality. He goes on. Says, bless those who persecute you. Bless you and do not curse. Now, he's not talking about swearing here, but he's talking about speaking life into those around you. Listen, it doesn't matter what they say about you. It doesn't matter what's going on. Speak life over the people around you. If you want to be a friend the way God designed you to be a friend, if you want to treat people in the church like family the way God designed, speak life into people's situations. Speak life over them. Don't point out the negatives or point out the bad things or point out the struggles or gossip about it, but speak life into every situation that you see. He goes on. It says, rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. I love this. It talks about sharing life in the good times and the bad times. We're going to celebrate others. When they're doing good, we're going to stand beside them and give them high fives and be excited for them. When they're going through hardships, we're going to put our arm around them. We're going to do what family is supposed to do. Sometimes we get so caught up with our own feelings, with our own struggles, that we forget that God designed us to be in relationship and to love others as well. So he says, be hospitable, open up your lives, live lives with others, rejoice with them, mourn with them when they need mourning with. Goes on. He says, and live in harmony with one another. Don't be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Don't be conceited. Paul literally gives us an outline. He says, listen, be devoted, be committed to one another in love, be a family to one another, be loyal to one another. And here's how you do it. It starts with your relationship with God. It moves into your attitude. Then after that, it starts getting practical. It starts getting hands-on. See, the truth is God designed you for relationship. And God desires for you to have relationships in your life. And maybe you're sitting here today and you're like, man, I'm 20-something, I'm 30-something. I feel like I have no friends. I feel like there's no one around me who I'm close with. I don't have any close friends. Well, let me promise you this. If you look at your life and you start doing these things to the people around you, if you start doing these to the people who are sitting next to you, I promise you that you're going to find friends. I promise you that if we are a church that starts loving people like family, If we start with us and say, I'm committed to doing these things, I'm going to be loyal to the people around me, I'm going to be committed to doing these things regardless of what I feel, regardless of what I think. I'm going to get outside of my own feelings and my own struggles, and I'm going to put the effort out there to be committed and loyal to the people around me. I promise you, you'll find friendship. See, God designed you to be friends. He designed you to have friends, and He designed you to be a good friend. So the Bible tells us that this should be a family. And Jesus says, listen, if we love one another, that's how people will know that we're His disciples. It starts in this room. It starts with the person next to you. It's not just the people that you get along with. It's not just the people that you agree with on every stance. It's a commitment to love. It's a commitment to open yourselves up, to be honest and to be open, to allow others in your life. It's not just about even connecting with people who are like you, but it's about finding friendship in the differences. I think sometimes in church we're so good at coming in and slipping out. But I want to encourage you, open up yourself. God designed this to be a family. And that's why we're doing this series. We're talking about friendship. We're talking about what the church should look like. But it takes a commitment from each person here to say, I'm willing to be committed, to be devoted, to be loyal to the person sitting next to me. Listen, you might not know their name. You might have never met them before. You might see them at church every week and be like, oh, well, I'm in a different age bracket. But the truth is it doesn't matter who's sitting next to you. It doesn't matter if you get along with them on a personal level or if you have similar interests or not. The church is meant to be committed in love. It's meant to be loyal. I want to encourage you today to join me in this journey. To join me in this journey of turning this church into a family. Not just a place where you come and hear a service and leave, but to be a part of committing ourselves to be the church that God designed us to be. Now, here's what I want to do as we get ready to close. I just want to take just a moment just to reflect. I think sometimes these messages are sometimes the hardest to hear, because I think sometimes we can hear a bunch of things and think, oh, well, that's nice, and maybe I'll do that. And then we walk out the door and we forget about it. Come on, let's be real, right? I'm not blind to that. I know sometimes we walk out of church and we forget what we just heard. But here's what I want to take a moment to do. Let's take a moment. Let's throw that verse back up here. And what I want to do is just take a moment just to think about some of those practical things. Think about someone, maybe in this room. Maybe it's someone you've never met in this room. Maybe it's someone, the next person who walks through the doors. I don't know who it is, but I want you to think about the people that God is calling you to be a friend to. I want you to look at the people in your circle. Look at the people that you could bring into this church. Look at the people who are sitting next to you every week and say, how can I practically be committed to them in love? How can I practically be loyal to them by doing these things? And so we'll just take a minute just to reflect and say, God, what do you want me to do? How can I put this into practice in my life today? So let's just take a moment just to reflect. as we get ready to wrap this up, I just want to pray. You can kind of keep reflecting, or you can pray with me. But I just want to pray for us in this moment, because this is not an easy thing to do, right? We're selfish people. We live for our own feelings and for our own desires and for our own struggles. So I just want to pray and ask that God would help us to do these things. Help us to be the church. Help us to be the people that He designed us to be. And God, we come to you today recognizing that we need you. God, we can't do this on our own. God, we can't just fake it until we make it. God, we know that this needs to be a genuine thing, God, and so we need you for it. God, I pray that you would help us to be committed and loyal people. God, let it start in our relationship with you. God, let it start with an excitement and a commitment to who you are. God, and then work it down to our attitudes, that we change our perspective, change our attitudes, that we become joyful and find joy in the midst of life, God, that we would be patient in the midst of hardship. God, but then I pray that you would help us to put this into action. God, that we'd be committed to one another in love. God, that even when it's hard, even when there's struggles in life, God, that we'd walk alongside of others. God, help us to open ourselves up. God, not just to come and attend or come and spectate, God, but to open ourselves up so that we can form real relationships the way that you want us to. God, I pray that you help us to speak life in the lives of those around us, God, that you'd help us to speak life over bad situations, God, that we would prophesy and things would come true, God, that we would see the fullness of all that you are by the things that we declare over each other's lives. God, we need you in our lives. We can't have these types of relationships, these genuine relationships, without you. God, we pray today that you would help us to love the people next to us. Give us your love so that we can pass that on. God, help us to love one another. And as people look from the outside, God, that they would see and be inspired by the way that we care for one another, by the way that we lift each other up, by the way that we carry each other. God, I pray that you help us to put this into practice and to live a life of friendship the way that you designed. God, not of shallow and meaningless friendships that fade away, God, but of friendships that are meaningful and that last. God, we thank you for who you are. God, and we thank you that you've designed the best life for us. God, so help us to step into it fully. God, we thank you for all that you've done for us. God, we thank you for the people that you've brought into our lives. God, the people that you've brought to this church. God, and we're grateful. And so we say thank you in Jesus' name. We say amen. And guys, I'm so glad that you were here with us today as we started off this series. We're going to be continuing this series for 3 more weeks as we keep digging into what a healthy friendship should look like, what it looks like to be a friend and to have friends in our lives. So we're going to continue this for 3 more weeks. So I want to encourage you and invite you back. Maybe even invite someone. Maybe someone who doesn't really like church too much. I'd encourage you, this is a time that we're going to talk about what the church should look like. So maybe you have someone in your life who says, I've been hurt by church, or man, the people in church aren't genuine. I would encourage you, this is a chance to bring them in and say, listen, we might not be a perfect church, but we're going to try our best to be the church God designed us to be. So I'd encourage you to invite someone. We also got some great connect groups going on this week. So Wednesday, Friday, I would encourage you to be there, to open yourselves up in hospitality, to open up your lives with one another and come hang out on one of those nights. Also, remember our meeting tonight to talk about Church in the Park. Really exciting event, a lot of fun things. It'll be a short meeting, so I'd encourage you maybe go grab lunch or dinner and then head back over because we're going to be having a short meeting talking about some of the things happening for that. So we love you guys. I'm glad you are here. We're going to end, but our leaders are going to come up. They're going to be available for after service, and they'll be here to pray. So if you have something you want to pray about or something that you're going through, or just someone or something that's going on in your life or anything you want to pray about, they're here. They want to pray with you. So guys, I'm so glad you were here, and we will see you guys later.